So hello, friend. I'm glad you're back. And as you noticed, I'm not in my office. I'm actually in Hendersonville, North Carolina, Blackjack Farms to be exact. I'm heading out on a project, an assignment, so to speak, and stopped by Blackjack Farms where Marie and her husband, they're fantastic hosts. So if you ever had a chance to look it up. But Midnight and I, that's my shepherd dog, we and Scott and Midnight, we all spent the day taking walks. We walked properties, we walked trails, we crossed streams, and at one point we found ourselves on the wrong side of a fence. Now, fences here in Henderson, North Carolina are plentiful. I mean, they are all over the place. And I'd imagine the fence is there to say, okay, this is my yard, that's your yard, identifying what is and what isn't yours. But what I also notice is fences are hard to get through. But gates. And that's what I want to talk to you about today is gates, because as we were walking and trying to desperately get on the right side of a fence, what we were looking for was the access, the gate to go ahead and get in. And in that time of walking, I reflected on a quote by Henry Cloud where he says, look, the point of gates in our fences is so that we can let the bad things out and the good things in. And so these gates are purposed to be managed. And so the question is, how's your gate? You know, when we talk about relationships, a lot of us have boundaries in them. What we think, how we feel. And for Scott and I would say we have a fence in our relationship, not between us, but around us. Because what I'm looking to do with my husband or with anybody else I'm in relationship with is to cultivate an environment of connectedness. So if I'm going to do that in an assumption, what am I inviting in as I manage that gate? Now, as Scott and I walked the different property lines and saw these different fences, I couldn't help but notice some gates had padlocks in them. Some were wide open. Some actually just were broken down and were not functional. So the question is, how is your gate when you put together an assumption in your relationship? See, these relationships we have in life, let's face it, they're a beautiful mess. They are just messy, messy, messy. They're hard to do. And we've talked about a lot of things, such as how our insecurities can get involved and how other people's insecurities can get involved. But as we put fences and protect the relationship and take a step back and put together an assumption, are we inviting in that which is going to cultivate an environment of connectedness? And I would say those things are, the compassion we talked about, the empathy we've talked about, even curiosity and creativity, right? The curiosity going, how is that person? Let them tell you their story. Because how many would agree? We'd all like to tell our own stories, wouldn't we? We don't want people telling stories about us. But if we are going to let something in, let's make sure it's not an agitator. I notice accusation and those insecurities can agitate the environment rather than cultivate an environment of connectedness. And so think about that as you're navigating your relationships and putting together that assumption in that relationship. If I assume this, if I tell this story, because remember that assumption is bridging a gap between what you know to be true, what you don't yet know to be true. If I put this in place and I let this through the gate, because I'm responsible for managing the gate in my assumptions, am I cultivating an environment of connectedness, or am I inviting in an agitation, an accusation, and something that's going to be destructive and divisive? See, personal responsibility in that, and being prudent as we think about what we're inviting in. I hope this information has been helpful to you. We've talked for several weeks about these things. And ultimately, I pray the bottom line you get is that if we're going to tell a story, let's be a story that we want told about ourselves. Now, I did have somebody say, well, Stephanie, what if what you're assuming is just wrong? What if you find out it's incorrect? Well, that's an opportunity to work on, resolving things and reconciling with your friend. But I will say this, I'm good with that. You want to know why? Because I'd rather be accused of being too kind than just flat out being wrong. And so the bottom line is kindness, right? So I hope this has been helpful to you. We're going to start moving into a completely different series where I want to talk about identity hacks. I find that this is an idea that came to me one night thinking, so many people listen to things to tell them who they are. And the question I did is, how did that person hack into that person's identity? You know, I think we all have a password to our heart. We all have a password that's into a place that tells us who we are. Let's be careful who we let in. I hope to see you during that series. Have a fantastic week.